Okay, so for today's podcast, I want to do something a little different. So up till now, I've had guests on and really enjoyed our conversation with various people, and hopefully you have too. Today, I'd like to just tell part of my story, an important chapter, and one that I'm super curious about for other people as well. So I'm going to do that. For those of you that are into AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, there's this thing called a speaker meeting. And what that means is if you looked at the local, online AA.org and you found your way to the meeting listings, you might find ones that say something to the effect of, the third Thursday of every month is a speaker meeting. And I mentioned this in my conversation with Bryce, but basically what that means is that one person tells a good chunk of their story over the course of, say, 45 minutes to an hour, and people just listen. And those are really great, and still are when I go to AA meetings, which is less these days. But early on, it was great because, I really didn't want to talk to anybody when I first came into AA. I wanted to sit in the back. I wanted to listen. I wanted to get out of there. And that's what I needed to do. That's what I wanted to do. And I was grateful that it was, Anonymous was right there on the door. So that suited me well in the speaker meeting in particular, because I knew full well once I understood that the concept of speaker meeting, I could really just be, hidden in the back and get the heck out of there and hear somebody's story. So anyway, you can kind of think of this as me telling part of my story. And the part that I want to spend a little time on is sort of the final days of my drinking. So one of the questions I often have for people is, when did you start wanting it for yourself? Or when was your last, how did that I call it the final approach. What's your final approach look like? And, I've heard lots of stories. Some people's are in the backs of cop cars. Some people, are jail. There's some people that are, finding themselves sleeping out in a field and they don't know where they are. There's just a lot of them. And I'm going to tell you mine. Mine's a little bit gentler than that. And it's like I've said in the past, my story is really all I have to offer. And so I just recount it as to what happened. So I'm going to take you through that. There's a timeline here. You have to understand that there's a progressive nature to this condition. This condition, substance use disorder is used sometimes, alcoholic, whatever. It's basically it had gotten worse and worse and worse. So I'm gonna overlay a timeline here, and I'm gonna take you to, let's see, about November of 2012. Now, I've said this before, and it's still true. If there's 30 days in a month, I'm going to be passed out drunk 30 days. Now, of those 30 days, perhaps one or two will be something unusual or fun, or something that you would normally think of as an event that one would go and drink at, like a concert or a nice dinner out or something like that. And maybe I'd have one or two of those. Always followed by, drinking to oblivion once I got home, or maybe not remembering the event that I went to. But suffice to say that there were places where alcohol kind of fueled the good time, and let's just call it 2 days a month. When I was younger, it would be more than that. But so that leaves 28 days of pretty sad, lonely drinking. So, I joke, I called it my quality me time. Well, it's the opposite of that, but humor is a big part of my toolkit. It has to be, because it's just so tragic what was going on, but I laugh about it, that quality me time. And so just to understand the condition a bit more, I think it's important that I explain that the level of cravings and biology that was altered as I approached the first drink every day. So mine doesn't start in the morning. There's some people who start their drinking, first thing in the morning. I wasn't one of those. I probably would have gotten there. But I'm like work all day and start drinking, or on the weekends I might start a little earlier, but let's just call it 4 o'clock. And there's about an 8-minute window. It may be 10, maybe it's 4, I don't know. But there's a little window of time when I first start drinking. I've approached that first drink with an elevated heart rate, pulse super high, probably my blood pressure up, and just sort of really uncomfortable physically and mentally. And I get that first few drinks in me, and I get this 8 minutes of perfection. So that what that means is that I've got energy. I feel like I'm enough. I feel like the world is okay. I feel like that my problems aren't insurmountable. That things are good. The problem is with this condition is that there's no stopping for me. So that's just a reality. And once I had the opportunity to meet others with this condition, I discovered that it's universal. So for those of you that don't understand that, you just have to accept that as a reality. So once I start, I can't stop. So I get this 8 minutes of perfection, followed by an acceleration into oblivion, and then I'm lucky if I remember going to bed, or maybe I wake up in the living room, whatever. But that's just my reality. So that's 30 days a month that I'm doing that, and the lead up to that first drink is just incredibly intense. I just don't know how to describe it unless you've had it. It's just overwhelming. And so that's my reality. And I've been doing that a long time. And it's just gotten worse and worse over time. Okay. So let's go to November of 2012. And Molly and I are living in this kind of posh house. We were living kind of a nomadic life at the time. Molly was pursuing horse training, and we were living in different places to pursue that. And as such, we ended up needing a place to rent, sort of on the fly, and we got this really nice place. So I remember where we were, and something happened one morning after a big night of drinking. Now, every night's a big night of drinking, but some nights are even a little bit bigger. So just for reference point, a typical night for me would have been a pint of either whiskey or tequila, about 12 tall cans of Coors Light, and then usually a half a bottle of wine. And I'll tell more of that here in a little bit. But that's a normal night. That's enough to put me to sleep. So some people that are listening to this are thinking, well, that's not much. And then some people are going, whoa. So I just as a relative concept, it was enough to put me out. Okay, so that's my normal. And then on the weekends, it would be more. So I would get a fifth, and I would put away most of a fifth in a night by myself. So one of those nights, I wake up, and I go to use the bathroom. And this is maybe going to be a little gross to some of you, but it's an important reality for me that I need to tell as part of my story. Is I poop a lot of blood. November, this is November 2012, scared me a lot. So that happened. And in my mind, there's also denial going on. It has nothing to do with the drinking. It's just maybe something else, blah, blah, blah. But then it happens again and again. And it's always related to an especially big night of drinking. And it really scares me. Now, I've already had this small voice, kind of alive and well in a quiet way in my mind for a long time, way back, because I always drank crazy amounts, and I always ended up in, kind of dangerous situations. I have scars on my body. I have injuries from it, and some of it seemed okay in my youth, etc. But it just kept going. Right. So, but I had this small voice, and that small voice was this voice that was saying, hey, this isn't so good. What's going on here isn't really working. But that voice didn't get much of the stage. I'd practiced so hard and so well for so many years, the work hard, play hard, the you deserve this, celebrate. And I didn't really know life without partying hard. It was every night for years and years and years and years, with the occasional night off here and there. And so that was my life. But that small voice was there, right? And so that small voice sees this blood repeatedly now in the middle part of November, and it scared me. And for the first time, I'm scared enough to I told Molly about it, and I said, I think I need to see a doctor, and I'm worried that it might be related to alcohol or pills. And, obviously she supports that. My goodness, she'll tell her story at some point on my podcast, and you'll get her perspective on this. But the answer is yes. And so we went to a doctor in Fort Collins, and I'd seen this doctor before for another injury of some sort. He was an older doctor, and I really liked him, and we had gotten on well, and because of that, he agreed to be my primary physician. We were kind of new to Fort Collins, and so that was cool. So I had this doc that I could go to, and I went in and I confessed to the situation about drinking heavily and then having blood in my poop, like a lot. And then he asked me the same questions that doctors in the past have asked. Most of us have had that form. How much do you drink per week? That kind of thing. And I'd lied every time for years and years and years. So for the first time, I'm honest. Molly's in the doctor's office with me. She's crying because I'm being honest about how much I drink. And he's like, whoa, hang on a second here. So we agreed to have a follow-up. He wants to have a look at my blood. And so I think I might even just gone to a lab right then and there, but we drew blood, and I returned, I think, a week later. And sure enough, my liver enzymes were not looking good. So that's what they look for, is the health of your liver through enzymes, I guess. And he said, this it's not going the right way. So I'm being honest. I'm scared. Still drinking, by the way. So this is probably early December. So November, the first incident happens. Now I'm probably in the early mid part of December. And he tells me 5 important words. He says, Brett, alcohol is not your friend. And I can remember him saying it. I can remember it so clearly. And it was a tough collection of words to hear. And I'd never really thought of alcohol as being my friend at that point. But there it was, a doctor saying, your liver enzymes are going the wrong way. What you're describing to me of drinking is pretty intense. And Molly's there, so now I've got, accountability going. And it's freaking me out, but at the same time, I'm scared. And he says, alcohol is not your friend. And then he says something else. He says, you might need some help. Well, that's not going to go over very well with me at that point, and it didn't. But at the same time, I was just scared enough, and that small voice was just getting enough room to be in the room. I mean, that small voice got me into that room and told the truth and everything else. But, I wasn't real thrilled with the idea that I might need help. So all I knew about help was the occasional person from high school that had gone away to rehab, and we made jokes about it. I had no concept of what that meant. But he had an answer to it. He handed me a sheet of paper that was a list of drug and alcohol counselors in the area. And so I had something to work off of, perhaps. So I left that doctor's appointment, and of course I drank that night. Maybe I took it off, but probably not. And I started going down that list, and basically I start by doing the requisite internet searches for trying to find if they have a website and get, see their picture, see what their vibe might be through that. And I find that a lot of them are faith-based recovery or faith-based addiction medicine. And that is certainly not, at that point in time, and still today, that's just not going to fly for me. Other people it will, and that's great. I have no no judgment on that, but I know for a fact that that's not going to fly with me. I still don't know a thing about AA except for that there's God in there. So that's not even going to be a part of this story. I'm not going to take you to the AA part of my story. But at this point, I've got this sheet of paper. I'm looking up these names. It's probably middle part of December, and I'm steering clear of faith-based ones. And those that don't have websites, I'm calling and leaving a message, and then they're, calling me back. And I have a little interview and tell them who I am, what I'm thinking about doing. And so I get a call back, and I've gone through quite a few of them, and I get a call back. And it just so happens the call comes in. I'm on my way back from the liquor store, which is my daily, trek up there and back. And I'm walking back, and I've got in my hand my 18-pack of tall cans of Coors, and I've got my pint, either going to be Jameson or probably Hornitos, one or the other. Maybe it's a fifth, but probably it's a pint. And then usually I'd have a bottle of red wine. Gato Negro was my choice because they had those big bottles, and Molly liked them. And the reason I did that is then I could, when I would go into the kitchen to fill her glass, I could chug it. And because it was a big bottle, it wouldn't show up on the Richter scale of my consumption. So that's all this thinking that I have in advance. But anyway, I'm standing there. And I'm on my way back, and it just so happens I'm standing in front of this big, beautiful church, probably an old church, on my walk back. And it's probably more like February now. So I've been doing my research for a while, because I think it was probably February. Let's just call it February. He calls me back. I'm standing there in front of this church. Maybe it's March, because I don't think the weather was super cold. So I've still been drinking. The first instance happens in November. Me and the doc meet, and he tells me that alcohol is not my friend. Here's a list for help. I'm mulling that over while simultaneously drinking to oblivion every night. So I'm at about March going through this list, trying to figure out something to maybe get some help, but probably not, because by now the bully is back in charge, and it's no big deal. And, stress kills. I had any number of justification as to why, George Burns smoked a cigar and drank whiskey every day. Those kinds of things. Like, I really believed that. Well, I didn't believe it. I don't know what I believed. Basically, my addiction was running the boat. And so I was figuring out why I could continue to do what I'd been doing. But I got to, remember at this point, I've had a good scare, and, I'm a little worried. Also around this time, I've got a new practice that I want to throw into the story. So I've got the horse before the cart a little bit. So probably right around there, November, December. So I've got this list. I start doing something regularly, and I want to say it's every night. It's probably close. So a typical night, maybe Molly would go to bed, and I'd get in some of my quality me time, which was just sad solo drinking. And I would do something because after the 8 minutes had passed, and I'm pretty much ripped, slurring. If you'd have called me, I'd been slurring, and I would go into the bathroom. Now, being around others like me, mirrors show up a lot in stories. And so here's my mirror story: is I would go into the bathroom, and I would stand in front of the mirror, and I would look at myself after I was, 3 sheets to the wind, and I would ask myself, "Hey, Brett, you having fun?" Of course, it was slurry. "Hey, Brett, you having fun? Is this fun? You having a good time?" Sometimes I would lean my forehead against the mirrored glass so that my eyes were like 1 inch away from each other, and I would look at myself, and then I would say something to the effect of, "You're going to have to quit forever. You're going to have to stop forever." And it was just a scary thing to be doing, but that was the only time that I had the courage to do that. It would be in that condition. stand there in front of a mirror saying, hey, are you having fun? Is this a good time you're having, Brett? Of course I wasn't. But I couldn't stop. Once I start, I can't stop. So my 8 minutes is long gone. Once I start, I can't stop. And there I am in front of a mirror. And it was sort of like my self-help, sort of like working out. It was my workout routine that I was only comfortable doing in that condition, would go into the bathroom, ask myself that question, and I did that every night. So there was some work being done there, I would argue. There was some time thinking and talking to myself about what was going on. All right, so back to my story. So we're probably around March, and I'm walking back from the liquor store, and I've got it in my mind that if I can just get a drug and alcohol counselor that I think I can gel with, what I want to do, which I explained to this gentleman who calls me, is I want to do what I'm calling the full court press. So the phone rings, I'm walking along, and it's a man named Steve Dunn. I can't know what happens if I don't meet Steve Dunn. I can't know. I can only tell what happens. So I'm standing there with my 18-pack of Coors Light, my pint of whiskey, and my big bottle of Gato Negro. And he calls, and I basically interview him, and there's just a really nice light quality to our conversation. Just there's a friendliness that feels good to me as we begin to talk. And I start with the question that I've been asking many before is, are you faith-based? Are you religious-based? Addiction counseling or substance abuse counseling, and he says no, I'm not. And then he chuckles and he said, I was at one time in the seminary. I was once a Catholic priest, but that was another chapter of my life, which I find beautifully ironic. And so I begin to explain to him. I say, hey, Steve, so here's what I want to do in the month of May, because it's out of ways, right? I don't want to do it now. I'm going to be drunk tonight, but out of ways, I am going to put down a marker, and I'm going to say for the month of May, 2013, as the year's 2013. In the month of May, I'm going to do what I'm going to call a full court press. And if you're a basketball player, basically, I'm going to get after it. I'm going to get after it for the month of May. And I tell Steve, what that means to me is I want to come and see a drug and alcohol counselor, you, Steve, 2 or 3 times a week for the month of May. And I'm going to abstain from drinking during that time. And I'm going to come in there, and I want you to know, Steve, that I'm not coming in to stop drinking. I'm coming in to give this voice in my head an opportunity to work with somebody like you and to see what we can do to, in my words, to sort this thing out. And what sort this thing out means to me is make it so that I can moderate. Somehow or another, the two of us are going to get together. I'm going to be honest. I told him about the blood. I'm going to be honest with you. We're going to talk this out. And over the course of this month, I'm not going to drink. And we're going to sort out what I need to do or what needs to be done, what needs to be figured out so that I can keep drinking and have it in moderation. And he says, sounds great. He says, I was a basketball player in my youth, a full court press. That sounds like an awesome idea. Let's do it. And so we did. And so I can't know what happens had I not had that phone call in front of that church with Steve Dunn. But I made good on it. I showed up on May 1st, or maybe it was May 2nd. I can't remember exactly, for our first session. I show up and I'm probably a little jittery. I'm sure my anxiety was through the roof because I always soothed, always medicated with alcohol in the evenings. And I know our sessions were in the evening. And so, I go in there and I explain it again, this full court press. And I just want to make it clear that I'm not here to stop drinking. That's not why I'm here. I'm just trying to understand more, learn more, share some things. And so that keeps, again, I'm going to use my language here, which is I'm keeping, my small voice had figured a way to keep the bully quiet. Because the bully's watching, right? The bully, that's what I call it. the work hard, play hard, this is all bullshit. You deserve to drink. Whatever he's going to say is silly. Because of the chain of events, I've gotten to myself where I can keep the bully quiet, and I'm there with a professional drug and alcohol counselor. So that's what's going on. So I sit down and we begin to have our conversations. He says, that sounds great. Full court press it is. We're not here to quit drinking. Let's talk, and let's begin with your drug and alcohol history. And so over the course of the first 2 sessions, which I believe were an hour each, it took me I think it might even take me a third hour to get through my history of drug and alcohol, use, ages, what was going on, what drugs entered when, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was fun to talk about. So when you listen to my podcast a bit, you're going to hear a concept that, addicts talking to addicts is really powerful stuff. I want to mention here that Steve Dunn is not in recovery. So that's a thing, right? At this point, I don't really know even what that means. I don't even know to ask it necessarily, but a lot of times people will say, well, can somebody be in addiction medicine and not be, in recovery themselves and be effective? And I can't answer that as a blanket statement for all of recovery. I do know that there's a connection that generally happens between two people in recovery that happens, and it's usually pretty powerful and pretty quick. But that question I can answer. In my story, Steve was absolutely the right guy at the right time. He was not in recovery, but he'd been in the recovery business or field for many years. And so in my case, as my story progresses here, Steve was key. So there I was having these conversations with him, and lighthearted, we're back for the full court press, and, we'd maybe talk about a little bit about basketball. And meanwhile, the anxiety and the power of being abstinent is creeping up on me, right? So that's a reality for people like me. We make commitments to not drink during the weekdays, as an example, or, we're going to drink light, and drinking light ends up hiding. And for me, at least, I'm going to drink light tonight. And then the truth is that I'm hiding booze all over the house so that I can sneak drinks here and there. And so we're getting on, really well. And he provides me with a book to read. It's a book called I'll Quit Tomorrow. It's been a while since I've read it. It was a really important book at the perfect time for me. And I read that book during that first couple of weeks or so of the month of May. And it was like this book was it was describing me to myself. And it was really weird. It was like reading a fortune, or like a future teller, and having it be accurate. It was just bizarre and super powerful. And Molly read it too. So Molly's in the middle of the full court press as well, because, I'm being open with her. I'm saying, not going to drink this month, going to Steve Dunn. I tell her about the sessions, and at some point, like I said, we'll have her on the podcast, but meanwhile, that I call it the train whistle. I can hear the train whistle, that those cravings are coming up. My mind and heart and anxiety is being soothed to some degree with this effort that I'm going through, where I'm talking about this stuff. I'm making room for it, but the physical cravings and the bully is getting tired of it to some degree. But now I've got this book I've read. It tells me some things about what it means to be in my predicament with this condition. And the main thrust of the book is, at least the way I remember it, is that, people like us aren't incapable of drinking a little. We just can't stop. We can't have a beer. And so with careful, narration, they explain that concept, and it fits me to a T. So now I've got that on board. That's, the first time I've really had any access to any kind of education when it comes to addiction medicine, because I've steered clear of it. And certainly the word alcoholic is never going to be used around me, because that word was poison to me. So you don't use that word. And so that brings me to the next pretty important part of my sessions there with Steve is we're jovial, same old. And he says, you know what, Brett, today I thought what might be kind of cool is I want you to look at this checklist of behaviors or things that, that you can look at, and maybe it'll help you assess whether you might be an alcoholic. Okay. He just used the word. I remember like a cold sweat. I remember being furious. I remember thinking that he had just destroyed all of this, goodwill and safety that we had built together. And he handed me that piece of paper, on a clip. I think it was on a clipboard, and I couldn't even hardly look at it. But out of the corner of my eye, I look down and I see these check boxes, and I speed read over them, and of course, all of them are me, right? I fit all of them, but for years I've thought these kind of check boxes are garbage, and this is just stupid. And now I'm just mad, and I'm just ready to leave. And I can't remember if I stood up, but I just looked at Steve and I said, this is way out of line. This is way out of line. I told you coming in here that I'm here for the full court press. We're not here to stop drinking. I don't like the word alcoholic. You've just used it. You've given me a sheet that I've seen before at some point, and I think it's garbage. And I'm basically really mad at you right now, and I think I'm done. And I remember this is a key part to those of you that are following along here. He took that piece of paper back and he said something super important. He said, "Hey, Brett, hey, no problem. Gosh, I'm so sorry." And I'll tell you, I can't know what happens. I know that I know now, looking back, that I'm in the middle of a window of opportunity. I'm gaining ground on understanding my predicament and my condition. And in that moment, by saying that, hey, no problem, let's get back to the full court press. Forget it. Let's just throw this away. Put this away. Forget it. And to sit back down and let that cortisol and that adrenaline slowly, fade and get back into that conversation with Steve, that was a big deal. So we continued, and I don't remember how that session went, other than meanwhile I had the train whistle coming. I knew I wasn't going to make it. I was going to drink, and I don't know if it was that night or a night later, but it was soon after that I told Molly, look, I'm getting a lot out of these sessions, but I really feel like I need to drink. And so I did, and got my 8 minutes, got my, medication of soothing, and I was right back, and I was drunk to oblivion. And the difference is that I'd had those sessions with Steve. I'd had a big dose of honesty with myself and with another person. I had a big dose of honesty with a doctor. I had a big dose of honesty with this book called I'll Quit Tomorrow, which was basically explaining my predicament. And it was just different. And as such, something changed. And it wasn't that night. It was probably a couple nights later, back to drinking, back going to Steve, telling him that I'm drinking again. He's asking questions like, well, how do you feel? Like, do you have any, his thing was about being mindful. Are you curious about how you're feeling right now, having drank last night? What does Molly think of it? And I'd built enough rapport that I was willing to start to answer those questions. And I think that's in here as well. but the bottom line is I'm still drinking, and one of these nights that I'm drinking, not one of the nights I go to see Steve, one of the nights I'm home, Molly's sitting on the couch. I remember it. Again, that courage is only, in the 8 to 12 beer window after I'm already half, feeling pretty buzzed. And I sit down on the couch next to Molly. And my recollection is I put my hand on her knee or on her hand. And I just said, Molly, I'm now convinced I'm somebody that can't drink a little. And I need to stop forever. Scary words, but with the alcohol in my bloodstream, I'd said it. It was a big moment for me. It wasn't on a mountaintop overlooking the meadows and the sun setting or any of that. It was me sitting on the couch next to Molly in front of a television set, I think, and just saying to her, hey, I think I'm one of these people that can't drink a little. Because I'm not going to use the word alcoholic at that point. Not going to happen. Don't like the word. Not interested in it. But that I could say. And that was in no small part because of the book, I'll Quit Tomorrow. So I've said that, and I go and I pick up the phone and I call and leave a message on Steve Dunn's voicemail and say, hey, I know our session's coming up or whatever, but if you can, I really need to talk to you. And so he called back. I don't know if it was the same night. I wasn't drunk when he called back, so it must have been the next day or something. And I said, Steve, change of plans. Our next sessions, I'm coming in with the intention of stopping drinking. I'm somebody who just can't drink a little. And he did what he's done up till now. He said, sounds great. I look forward to our chat. Now, I can't know what happens if he presses or pushes or puts pressure on me with that sheet of paper, or when I come out like this and say, hey, I think I'm going to stop. I suspect he's seen a lot of things in that line of work with people like me, trying to understand what's going on with them while simultaneously having their brain hijacked by addiction. So there I am going back to him, and I say to him and I say to Molly, okay, I'm going to set a date. My last drink is going to be, I think it was on May 26th, May 27th, something like that. Because the 28th is my sobriety birth date. So most of us have a sobriety date. Some of us don't care. I do. Mine is May 28th, 2013. And so I tell him that. So I tell Molly, between here and the 20, I think it was the 26th or 26th, I think. I want to just get a lot of drinking in. I want to go and taste all the things that I love. I want to try to have all the different kinds of drinks that I love and do my best to just basically say goodbye to it. This all sounds really poetic and fairly easy, especially compared to some of the stories I've heard. It's pretty easy go of it. But it just for reality, just as a reality check here, everything I'm talking about right now is super dangerous. Because until I break that cycle and get some sobriety, get some distance between my last drink, it's all up in the air. But I will say this, something has changed, and that proves out as my story progresses here. So we do that, and I think it was on a weekend, and a couple nights we go into town. We're in walking distance of Old Town, Fort Collins. We go to all kinds of places. We get wine and lemon drops and kamikazes and all the things like gin and tonics and vodka cranberry, on it goes, all these beers. I wasn't much of a brew drinker at that point. It was just too heavy. Somehow or another, I lost my taste for those. And when it came to beer, all I really wanted was light beer. But I probably had some beers as well, and shots. I'm sure I had lots of shots. And we did that. And the idea was I was going to say goodbye to it. And I'll tell you one thing that happened that was really amazing and beautiful, and one of these beautiful coincidences, or my Uncle Wayne would say a quinky dink. This amazing quinky dink happened, and I'm sitting outside at this place. I think it was called Jack's, Jax, and it was like a seafood oyster place in Fort Collins. We're sitting outside and we're having drinks, of course, and food, I think. And there's a speaker that's mounted outside and it's playing music, and a song comes on. So I'm a Deadhead. I'm a Grateful Deadhead. I love their music. I went to quite a few concerts as a young guy, and a song comes on. It's called "Lost Sailor," and the refrain is, "You're a lost sailor. You've been way too long at sea." And that the Dead would play on that speaker, and that it would be the song "Lost Sailor." That song, to me, still every time I hear it, I get choked up. And there I was, lost sailor, and I'm putting booze to bed in my life, and I'm scared to death, but I'm feeling different. So that's going on. Of course, every time that we go do these little sojourns out to Fort Collins downtown and walk around and get our drinks and maybe listen to some music or whatever, of course I go home and then I've got my back up there. So, I'm never done until I'm passed out. So that's just a reality of my condition. Those of you that don't understand any of this, you just have to understand that that's true. That I don't just come home and stop and maybe drink some water. Like, I can't stop. So I come home and drink to oblivion and pass out. So that's going on too. So I think there was 3 nights of that. And the 27th rolls around, and I remember it was a hot, sunny day, and this is the day I'm going to have my first day sober, and, I'm going to live a new life as somebody who can't drink a little. And the sun was out and the lawn was long and the smell of gas and mowers was in the air. And I realized that I just wasn't going to be satisfied. This is, in my mind, this is the addiction part of my mind, stepping forward, the bully, and wrestling back. And probably the most dangerous thing of this part of my window of opportunity is I tell Molly, look, we did all that and I drank all that good stuff and, I said goodbye, but you know what? I'm never going to be satisfied if I don't mow the lawn and drink cold beer after I mow the lawn. I can't even imagine what's going through her head about now. She's bought into all this. She's watched me come home from Steve Dunn. She's, been a participant. She's read the book, I'll Quit Tomorrow. And there I am saying, you know what? I think I need one more day in order to drink cold beer after mowing the lawn. And so I do. Now, I can remember that the joy of it wasn't particularly strong. I remember that I felt kind of disappointed in myself. But, once I start, I'm not going to stop. So again, I got blown away, drunk, and then that next day when I woke up was the beginning of my new life. Now, I'm one of the lucky ones. At this point, I still haven't met anybody like me. So I'm not going to AA yet. I haven't met any others. I haven't compared stories with other people. I only know mine. I felt so unique and scared and alone and not knowing where to turn for so many years as this progressive nature of this disease took hold. And I'll tell you, I'm one of the lucky ones because I find out that there are others like me. My obsession and cravings stopped on that day. I got up that morning, Molly and I walked into town to get breakfast. Of course, I'm hungover, right? But I felt physically different. I felt like I was wearing a wetsuit or something. I always think my feet felt floppy, like I had flippers on, and my arms felt weird, and I just felt strange physically, a new feeling. And I knew that I really was done. And I felt physically different. Now, I've had people that I've told this part of my story to try to put a label on it, you had a spiritual experience or, any number of things. And that all could be true. I don't know. I because I'm more science-based, evidence-based, I think my brain fired off some chemicals and basically worked on saving my life. And enough things had come in online, but my point is that I felt different. And although over the years I've had moments of some cravings here and there, like I see a drink on a movie or I'll be at a baseball game and there'll be that little moment where, especially early on, where that I would feel it a little bit, but nothing compared to what I was used to for years and years and years. And I started my new life. I'm one of the lucky ones in that cravings and obsession basically stopped then and there. And it wasn't for another week or two till I found my way into my first AA meeting. And I can't know what happens if I didn't do that. There's all these things I can't know. I can only tell you my story. And I'm so grateful that all of that happened, right? All of it. And for years after, every year that I was sober, I would call Steve on my sobriety birthday every year. And, I would always plan to be all stoic and I was going to hold my shit together and, recount those moments that were so critical and how grateful I was for him. And he always switched it back and said, hey, that I had done the work. He didn't deserve any credit. But anyway, I'd always come to pieces. I would just be a bawling fool. Because the truth is, folks, is I'm so grateful to be free of all that stuff. And most of us are. And, that window of opportunity showed up. I got through it. And now I just have to protect it. I think of it like a lion. I protect it with everything I got. I'm ferocious about protecting it. And sometimes it'll mean that I'll leave places where I get uncomfortable. It's not that people can't drink around me or anything like that, but there's certain situations where I'm like, this isn't my gig, especially if I'm up close to people that I know and they're getting really drunk. I just usually don't want to be around it. And so I'm in recovery and I'm learning how to live life without drugs and alcohol. I hope these podcasts are useful to you in some way. I know that they're helpful to me in some ways, but more importantly, I'm really hopeful that they help a few people that get a chance to hear them. So my name is Brett Levins. I'm 9.5. I think it's 9 years and 7 months, some change, sober. And May 28th will be my 10 years. So can't count my chickens. Still a little ways out, but so far so good. Thanks for listening.